Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I'll be doing a what if scenario, and that is, what if Darth Vader upgraded his suit? This one is for James Earl Jones. Darth Vader stood in the shadowy silence of his meditation chamber aboard the Executor. The soft hum of the ship's systems barely registered to him as the rhythmic hiss of his respirator filled the space. Every breath was a reminder of pain, of failure, of what he had become. He clenched his gloved fist, feeling the limitations of his mechanical body. His suit, designed to sustain his life after Mustafar, was more than just a means of survival. It was his prison. He had no doubt that the Emperor had seen to that personally. The armor was cumbersome, its internal systems inefficient, and most damning of all, it was vulnerable to Force lightning, his master's greatest weapon. Palpatine had made sure that Vader could never rise against him. Vader had long accepted this reality, but recent battles had shifted something within him. His duel with Ahsoka on Malachor, the countless skirmishes with the rebels, and even his sparring sessions with the Inquisitors. All these encounters had shown him the cracks in his armor, both figurative and literal. His movements were slower, more methodical. The once fluid, lightning-fast reflexes of Anakin Skywalker were dulled by the weight of the suit and the restrictions placed upon him. But something else gnawed at him too: anger. The rage that had sustained him for so long had always been directed outward, at Obi-Wan, the Jedi, the Rebellion. Yet now, a part of him began to turn inward, to question why he continued to allow himself to be bound by this pain. He was the Dark Lord of the Sith, second only to the Emperor. Shouldn't he be more than this? The thought of rebellion was dangerous, even for someone like him. Palpatine was always watching, always manipulating, but the question had been planted in his mind. What if he could improve his suit? What if he could free himself from the limitations imposed on him? Vader's first step was cautious. Palpatine had eyes everywhere, and any overt moves to modify his suit would be seen as an act of defiance. But subtle improvements made in the guise of routine maintenance could go unnoticed. He began studying the schematics of his armor more closely, probing the systems with the cold, analytical mind of an engineer. He found the flaws easily. The neural interface that linked his brain to the suit's systems was outdated, inefficient. His joints, though strong, were cumbersome, lacking the agility he had once taken for granted. The prosthetic limbs were crude compared to the ones he had seen constructed during the Clone Wars, more suitable for a mass-produced droid than a Sith Lord. Even his breathing apparatus, while functional, was prone to malfunctions that left him vulnerable in battle. For all its weaknesses, however, the most glaring issue was the suit's inability to shield him from Force lightning. It was the Emperor's insurance policy, a safeguard that would leave Vader defenseless should he ever challenge his master directly. Vader's visits to the Imperial Medical Center on Coruscant became more frequent. He requested upgrades, modifications, enhancements under the guise of improving his combat readiness. The technicians obeyed without question, though they were always careful not to push the limits. Palpatine's shadow loomed large, and none wanted to risk his fury. But Vader had long since learned to work in the shadows as well. He called upon a handful of trusted droids and engineers, isolated from the core of Imperial bureaucracy, to conduct more specialized work. These were not the Emperor's loyalists, but beings Vader had carefully selected and brought under his influence over the years. They knew nothing of his plans beyond their specific tasks. The initial modifications were minor but effective. He replaced the obsolete neuro interface with a more responsive system, allowing him to react faster in combat. His limbs were upgraded with newer servo motors, which would give him greater strength and dexterity. His helmet sensors were improved, giving him a broader range of vision and hearing. These changes were enough to give him a slight edge in combat, but they were not the real goal. The breathing apparatus was next. Vader could not escape the need for it, but he could make it less vulnerable. He had seen too many times where a direct hit to the chest panel could disable it, leaving him gasping for air. The new design incorporated a secondary system, hidden and redundant, that could keep him alive if the primary system failed. It was not a perfect solution, but it gave him more confidence on the battlefield. As these upgrades took shape, he began to notice a change in his performance. His movements, while still not as fluid as they had been before Mustafar, became sharper. He was no longer as reliant on the brute strength the suit had initially provided. His precision in combat returned, and his enemies, rebels, Jedi, and even his own subordinates began to feel the difference. Yet, for all these improvements, the greatest vulnerability remained: Palpatine's lightning. Vader knew that tampering with the suit's ability to withstand Force lightning would be the most dangerous change he could make. If the Emperor ever discovered this, there would be consequences. Dire consequences. But he also knew that he could not allow himself to remain so exposed. The Sith were always seeking to overthrow their masters, and Vader had no intention of being a servant forever. To address this, Vader secretly enlisted a small group of engineers who were completely unaware of the suit's origins or its master. They were specialists in energy shielding and protective technology drawn from obscure corners of the galaxy. Under the guise of developing personal shields for elite stormtroopers, they were tasked with creating a defense system that could be integrated into his armor. The project took months of careful planning. Every part of the suit was dissected and analyzed to ensure the Emperor's spies did not notice the alterations. Eventually, they produced a prototype, a discrete energy shield embedded within the armor structure, capable of absorbing high levels of electrical discharge. It was not perfect, but it was enough to give Vader some protection against the Emperor's most dangerous weapon. Once the upgrades were completed, Vader tested the suit in private. He found that the shield could absorb the initial shock of lightning, dispersing the energy throughout the armor structure. The pain was still there, but it was manageable. He could survive an attack long enough to retaliate, which was more than he had ever been capable of before. For weeks, Vader continued his work, slowly but surely improving his suit. But he was careful, always mindful of the Emperor's presence. He knew Palpatine would eventually notice the changes, but he also knew the old man thrived on deception and power plays. As long as Vader did not openly defy him, the Emperor would allow it, perhaps even be amused by it. After all, it was the way of the Sith to seek strength, even at the expense of their masters. It wasn't until a particularly grueling battle against the Rebel Alliance that the Emperor finally commented on the changes. After a victorious but difficult engagement, Vader returned to Coruscant, where he was summoned to Palpatine's throne room. As Vader knelt before the Emperor, he could feel the old man's eyes on him, probing him through the Force. The Dark Lord waited, his mind shielded, his thoughts focused on the immediate.
You have become stronger, Lord Vader. I sense less weakness in you. How interesting.
Vader did not reply immediately. He knew that Palpatine already suspected the truth.
My improvements have allowed me to better serve you, my master.
Indeed. But remember, Lord Vader, true power comes not from the strength of one's body or armor, but from the depths of the dark side. Do not allow your reliance on machinery to distract you from your true purpose.
As he left the throne room, Vader could still feel the Emperor's gaze on him, a cold reminder that his master was always watching, always waiting. But for the first time in years, Vader felt a flicker of something beyond anger and pain, a sense of control. His suit was no longer just a prison. It was becoming a tool, a weapon, something he could shape to his will. He knew the path ahead would be dangerous. The Emperor would not tolerate a direct challenge. Not yet. One day, when the time was right, Vader would be ready to claim the power that was rightfully his. And this time, no one, not even the Emperor, would be able to stop him. As the months went by, the galaxy was still engulfed in the fires of the Empire's rule. But Darth Vader's mind was consumed with thoughts far beyond the daily operations of military command. He had continued upgrading his suit, refining it to the point where the improvements were not merely functional, but a reflection of his growing desire for independence. Palpatine, while appearing to tolerate Vader's subtle upgrades, was not fooled. The tension between master and apprentice grew quietly, like a coiled viper waiting to strike. The Sith Lord knew the day would come when one of them would make their move. Vader, meanwhile, prepared meticulously for that moment. His knowledge of the suit systems had reached a point where he could manipulate them with ease, adjusting everything from life support to combat readiness within seconds. He could now redirect power from different systems to enhance his strength or speed, and the protective shielding against force lightning had been perfected, able to withstand sustained blasts. He remained cautious nonetheless. Palpatine was no fool, and if he suspected Vader of outright rebellion, the consequences would be swift and severe. The summons came unexpectedly. Vader was aboard the Executor, overseeing a series of fleet maneuvers, until he was called back to Coruscant by Palpatine. Vader left immediately, boarding his personal shuttle and flying to Coruscant. The ride was silent, and though his mind was calm, a sense of anticipation swirled deep within him. He knew that this meeting would be different from the others. Palpatine rarely called him without purpose, and Vader could feel the dark tendrils of the Force shifting, heralding something momentous. When he arrived at the Imperial Palace, Vader moved through the halls with purpose, his cloak billowing behind him as stormtroopers and officers made way for the Dark Lord. His suit hummed with quiet power, the new modifications making him feel more alive than he had in years. As he entered the throne room, Palpatine sat on his elevated dais, shrouded in darkness. Palpatine's yellow eyes glowed beneath his hood, and a smile crept across his face as Vader approached.
"Kneel, my apprentice."
Vader obeyed, lowering himself to one knee.
"There is a disturbance in the Force, a threat to our empire, but more importantly, a threat to me.
What do you require of me, my master?
You are to eliminate this threat. A group of dissidents has been stirring unrest on Mustafar, the very planet where you were reborn into the dark side. Their leader is strong with the Force, strong enough that I wish to see your skills tested. I trust you will not disappoint me, Lord Vader."
Vader nodded, but he sensed something beneath the surface of the Emperor's words. This was not a mere mission. It was a test, one designed to gauge Vader's loyalty, his power, and perhaps his intentions. Palpatine's challenge was clear: prove your strength or be crushed under the weight of your ambition. The fires of Mustafar were as hot and violent as Vader remembered. As his shuttle descended through the clouds, he saw the blackened ground where he had once been defeated, broken, and remade into something else, something more powerful, yet more enslaved. It was a place of both defeat and rebirth. As the ramp lowered and he stepped out, the oppressive heat barely affected him. His new modifications ensured that his suit regulated temperature far more efficiently than before, making the planet's harsh conditions little more than an inconvenience. His mission was clear: eliminate the dissident leader and whatever followers they had managed to gather. However, Vader could feel the familiar pulse of the dark side emanating from the planet. It wasn't the same raw, uncontrolled fury he had once wielded, but something sharper, colder, a power that had been honed over years of suffering, discipline, and focus. Vader pressed forward, his thoughts focused on the task at hand. His suit hummed with mechanical efficiency, each step purposeful as he approached the location where the dissidents were said to be hiding. The abandoned structure loomed ahead, a twisted remnant of a former mining facility. But as Vader neared the entrance, he felt a ripple in the Force, something familiar. His pace quickened as he entered the main chamber, and then he saw them. The leader of the dissidents was a woman, cloaked in black, her face partially obscured. Her presence in the Force was unmistakable, strong, confident, but layered with a past steeped in darkness. Vader stopped, his breathing measured, the mechanical sound of his respirator filling the chamber. The woman lowered her hood, revealing a face that Vader had not seen for some time, his former apprentice, Ahsoka Tano. A wave of memories crashed into Vader, but they were quickly suppressed. The child he had once trained was gone. Before him stood a warrior, and in her eyes he saw not the eagerness of a learner, but the hardened resolve of someone who had faced unimaginable hardship.
You survived.
Looks like I wasn't the only one.
This place is where you will die.
You've changed, but so have I. You're more machine than man now, Anakin. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to stop you.
You will fail.
Without another word, their sabers ignited, Vader's blood-red blade casting a sinister glow, while Ahsoka's twin white blades blazed like a pure light against the oppressive darkness. Their clash was immediate and brutal. Vader, more powerful and ruthless than ever, attacked with overwhelming strength, each strike designed to crush Ahsoka under the sheer weight of his force. But she was fast, her movements agile and precise. She dodged and countered with a skill that rivaled his own, her years of fighting as a lone warrior having honed her abilities to the razor's edge. Vader's suit modifications allowed him to react faster than he had in years. His limbs moved with a precision and speed that would have been impossible before the upgrades, and the enhancements to his vision meant that Ahsoka's attempts to outmaneuver him were less effective. But she had learned too. Her connection to the Force was different now, more balanced, more controlled. As the fight raged on, the room was filled with the hum of their lightsabers and the crackling energy of the Force. Debris flew, walls cracked, and the molten lava bubbled outside the facility, a reminder of the planet's violent nature. It was a battle of equals, each knowing the other's strengths and weaknesses from years of shared history. Vader pushed forward, his power in the dark side growing with every strike. But as their sabers clashed again and again, he began to feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: doubt. Ahsoka was not the naive apprentice he remembered. She had grown in power, in wisdom, and as she deflected another one of his blows, her voice cut through the chaos.
Anakin, please, come back to the light. You don't have to do this. There's still good in you.
For a brief moment, Vader hesitated. His mind flashed back to the days of the Clone Wars, to his time as her mentor, and to the life he had once dreamed of with Padme. But just as quickly, the memories turned to ash, consumed by the flames of Mustafar and the pain of his transformation.
Anakin is gone. I am what remains.
With a roar, he unleashed a powerful wave of Force energy, knocking Ahsoka back and sending her crashing into a wall. Ahsoka struggled to her feet, her breathing labored. Despite the intensity of the battle, she remained defiant, but Vader could see the fatigue in her movements. She would not last much longer. He advanced slowly, his lightsaber raised for the final blow. But as he stood over her, the vision of his former self, his former apprentice, flickered in his mind. The conflict within him, buried for so long, began to resurface. The upgrades to his suit had given him physical strength, but they had not removed the ghosts of his past. And here, on the very planet where he had been reborn, he found himself facing a choice he had long thought was no longer his to make. For a fleeting second, the air between them was still. Vader's hand tightened on the saber, the blade humming just above Ahsoka's fallen form. And then, in an act that surprised even him, he deactivated his weapon.
Leave Ahsoka before I change my mind.
Ahsoka, battered but alive, looked up at him, her eyes searching for any trace of the man she had once known. She hesitated, then nodded, her blade still in hand, but no longer raised.
I hope that one day you'll see what you've become.
Darth Vader emerged from the structure into the harsh volcanic landscape of Mustafar. The fires burned bright against the dark sky, illuminating the jagged terrain that had been the site of his greatest defeat and transformation. But now, there was a deeper conflict raging within him. Ahsoka's words echoed in his mind. For years, Vader had convinced himself that Anakin Skywalker was dead, that his past life had been consumed by the dark side, buried under layers of pain, anger, and regret. Yet here, on the very planet where he had sealed his fate, a small part of him questioned the path he had chosen. The image of Ahsoka, strong, defiant, and unbroken, stirred memories of who he once was and the bond they had shared. For the first time in years, he found himself questioning the absoluteness of his transformation. But as quickly as those doubts arose, Vader crushed them. There was no room for weakness, no space for second guessing. He was the Emperor's enforcer, the Dark Lord of the Sith. The Empire needed him to remain strong, unyielding. He boarded his shuttle and set a course back to Coruscant. When Vader arrived at the Imperial Palace, he knew the Emperor would be waiting. As he approached the throne room, the heavy doors opened before him, revealing the Emperor sitting in his elevated throne, a shadowed figure of malevolent power. Palpatine's yellow eyes gleamed with curiosity as he observed his apprentice approach. He could feel the turmoil radiating from Vader, the faint disturbance that had rippled through the Force since the duel on Mustafar. Palpatine sensed that the mission had not gone as he anticipated.
Lord Vader, you have returned.
The dissidents have been eliminated, my master. Their leader was Ahsoka Tano.
Ahsoka Tano. She was once your apprentice, was she not?
She was.
And yet, she lives.
Vader's silence was answer enough. The Emperor's lips curled into a cruel smile. He had expected this. Palpatine had known from the moment Vader was sent to Mustafar that his former apprentice would test his resolve, but he had not intervened. Instead, he had allowed the encounter to play out, knowing that it would reveal the cracks in Vader's loyalty.
You let her escape. Explain yourself, Vader.
She is of no consequence. She fled into the shadows. I will hunt her down.
Do not lie to me, Lord Vader. You are my apprentice. You let her go because a part of you still clings to the past, to Skywalker.
Anakin Skywalker is dead.
Is he? Or is he still alive, buried deep within you, whispering in your ear, weakening you?
Vader remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor. His thoughts were a storm of rage and confusion. He had believed for so long that he had severed all ties to his former life, but Ahsoka had awakened something in him, something that refused to be silent.
Do not mistake my leniency for weakness, Lord Vader. You are still valuable to me, but if I ever sense that your loyalty falters, if I ever detect a shred of Skywalker within you again, I will finish what Kenobi could not. You will not have another chance.
I understand, my master.
Leave me, Lord Vader, and do not fail me again.
Vader rose as he turned and exited the throne room. As the doors closed behind him, he allowed himself a moment of retrospection. Palpatine had seen through him, as he always did, but it didn't matter. Vader had made his choice. Or so he told himself. In the following weeks, Vader threw himself into his duties with renewed vigor. He hunted down rebel cells, crushed dissent, and continued to refine his suit's capabilities. Every mission, every battle was an attempt to bury the lingering doubts that gnawed at him. But no matter how many enemies he vanquished, the memory of Ahsoka's words remained. The rebellion against the Empire was growing. Small pockets of resistance had begun to coalesce into something more organized, more dangerous. And though Vader relished the opportunity to crush them, he could not shake the feeling that this rebellion was merely a symptom of a larger problem, a problem that lay at the heart of the Empire itself. More and more, Vader found himself questioning the Emperor's vision for the galaxy. Palpatine ruled through fear and oppression, but fear had its limits. There were cracks in the Empire's foundation, and Vader could see them widening with each passing day. The rebels were not just fighting for survival, they were fighting for an ideal, something that the Empire could never offer: hope. Vader had once believed in hope. He had once believed in a future where peace and justice could be restored to the galaxy. But those dreams had been shattered on Mustafar, along with his body. Now, he was nothing more than a tool of the dark side, a weapon of destruction. But was that all he wanted to be? Months passed, and Vader continued to serve the Emperor, his loyalty outwardly unwavering. But in secret, he began to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. He knew that Palpatine's patience was limited. The Emperor would not tolerate the slightest hint of rebellion. One day, as he meditated in his private chamber aboard the Executor, Vader felt a presence in the Force, one that he has not sensed in years.
Anakin, you are not alone.
Vader's eyes snapped open, his respirator hissing as he rose to his feet. The voice was unmistakable. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi. The memory of his former master surged to the forefront of Vader's mind, along with the searing pain of their last encounter. Kenobi had been the one to leave him broken and burning, the one who had allowed him to be reborn as Darth Vader. But now, Kenobi was reaching out to him through the Force. But in doing so, he revealed his location. Vader could feel it, a challenge, a call to face his past once again. Without hesitation, Vader activated his ship's communication system and ordered a course for Tatooine. He would not run from his past, not this time. If Kenobi was still alive, Vader would find him, and this time, there would be no mercy. The desert sun of Tatooine was unforgiving, casting long shadows over the desolate dunes. Darth Vader stood on the edge of the jungling wastes, where the faint remnants of Kenobi's presence lingered in the Force. The planet had always been a source of painful memories, of his childhood as Anakin Skywalker, of his mother's death, of his own deep-seated failures. But now it would serve as the backdrop for the final confrontation with his old master. The confrontation didn't take long to materialize. Obi-Wan appeared, his face worn but resolute. He had spent years in exile, biding his time, but now there was no escape. Vader, cloaked in his black armor, towering and menacing, ignited his crimson lightsaber with a hiss. Kenobi didn't hesitate. His blue lightsaber came to life, its glow a stark contrast to the desolate landscape. There was a somber understanding between them. This would be their last duel. Vader lunged forward with a fury that spoke of decades of pent-up rage. Obi-Wan deflected his strikes, as precise and calm as ever, though slower and less agile than he had once been. Vader's movements were deliberate and powerful, no longer hindered by the limitations of his suit. His upgrades had made him faster, more fluid, and his connection to the dark side only fueled his assault. The duel raged across the sand, a violent dance of dark and light. Obi-Wan fought valiantly, but it was clear that the years had taken their toll on him. He was not the same Jedi who had bested Anakin on Mustafar. He was older, weaker. Vader, on the other hand, was stronger than ever. His strikes became more forceful, his presence in the Force overwhelming. Finally, with a swift, calculated move, Vader disarmed Obi-Wan, sending his lightsaber clattering to the ground. The former Jedi Master stood defenseless before his former apprentice, breathing heavily, his fate all but sealed.
You have failed, Obi-Wan. Anakin Skywalker is dead.
Then I truly have failed you.
With that, Vader swung his lightsaber, cutting down his former master in one swift, final stroke. Obi-Wan collapsed to the ground, his body disappearing into the Force, leaving only his empty robes behind. Vader stared down at the empty cloth, his victory hollow. He had killed the last link to his past, yet it did not bring the satisfaction he had hoped for. The shadow of Anakin Skywalker still lingered, no matter how hard he tried to extinguish it. Vader returned to Coruscant victorious, though the victory felt meaningless. His old master was gone, and yet the void within him remained. Still, there was one last thing. He had known for some time that the Emperor no longer trusted him fully. Their bond, once forged in the fires of the dark side, had begun to fracture. And now, with the completion of his suit's upgrades, Vader was ready to take his rightful place as the ruler of the galaxy. As he entered Palpatine's throne room, Palpatine's eyes narrowed, already sensing a shift in the Force. He knew what Vader intended, and he welcomed it.
Lord Vader, you have returned.
I have defeated Kenobi. He is no longer a threat.
Good, but I sense something else. You are restless, my apprentice.
I am no longer your apprentice.
Ah, so it has come to this then. You believe you are strong enough to challenge me.
The air in the throne room grew heavy as the Emperor's dark presence filled the space. Vader, however, was not intimidated. His new suit had given him more freedom, more control, and more importantly, he had been preparing for this moment for a long time.
You have ruled through fear long enough. Now, I will take my place as the true master of the dark side.
Foolish, arrogant boy. You forget who made you.
You made me weak, but I have surpassed you.
The Emperor's hands crackled with blue lightning as he unleashed a barrage of Force lightning at Vader. In the past, this attack would have overwhelmed him, but the upgrades to his suit had mitigated the lightning's effect. Though the pain was intense, Vader stood firm, absorbing the burn of the assault.
Impossible!
Vader moved forward, his lightsaber deflecting the bolts of lightning as he closed the distance between them. The Emperor, now desperate, threw everything he had at Vader: lightning, telekinetic strikes, the full fury of the dark side. But Vader was relentless, his enhanced suit and unwavering focus making him nearly unstoppable. With a swift, precise strike, Vader severed the Emperor's hand, causing him to scream in pain. Palpatine staggered back, his power waning. For the first time in decades, the Emperor of the galaxy was vulnerable. With a final strike, Vader drove his lightsaber through Palpatine's chest. The Emperor gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief before collapsing to the floor, lifeless. For a moment, the throne room was silent. The dark side itself seemed to tremble as the balance of power shifted. Darth Vader stood over the fallen body of Emperor Palpatine, his victory absolute. Vader deactivated his lightsaber and looked down at the body of his former master. It was over. Palpatine was dead, and with his death, Vader had taken his place as the new ruler of the galaxy. But as he stood there, in the heart of the Empire, he felt no triumph, no satisfaction. The dark side had consumed him completely, yet the emptiness remained. He turned and walked toward the throne, his steps heavy with the weight of his choices. He ascended the dais and sat in the Emperor's seat, looking out over the galaxy that was now his to control. But as he gazed into the vast expanse of the stars, Vader knew that this victory had come at a great cost. He had severed all ties to his past, but in doing so, he had also severed any chance of redemption. He was truly alone. And though he was now the most powerful being in the galaxy, he had never felt more trapped. The dark side was his prison, and there would be no escape. The reign of Darth Vader had begun, but the price of his power was eternal isolation. The galaxy would bow before him, but within, he remained haunted by the ghost of Anakin Skywalker, forever lost, forever unreachable. And that's the end of the story, dedicated to the late James Earl Jones, a voice that became synonymous with the character of Darth Vader. His powerful, resonant voice brought depth and gravitas to the Dark Lord, giving life to a character who has become one of the most iconic villains in cinematic history. James Earl Jones's portrayal of Vader was more than just performance. It was an indelible mark on the cultural landscape, a voice that defined a generation and left an enduring legacy. His contribution to the world of film and his portrayal of Darth Vader will forever be remembered and celebrated. As we close this chapter, we honor his memory and his great impact on storytelling. Be sure to drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it, and if you're new, please subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. And be sure to check out my film channel, Pulley Productions, where I produce independent short films. Have a great day, my friends, and may the Force be with you.